welcome to the Tuesday, January 7th, 2020 meeting of the Brattleboro Selectboard. It is our first meeting of the new year, and we know this meeting has been properly warned because we were here entering into executive session at 5:15. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve meeting minutes from December 10th and December 17th of 2019. All right, we've got two. All in favor? Aye. Excellent. Motion carries. The remarks that I have are there is a homeless vigil scheduled for 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, January 14th. You can find further information about that on Facebook. We may be right here in this very room, unfortunately, but I wanted to make sure to say it out loud so that if people are interested, you can go on Facebook, take a look around, and find the information that you need. You could also contact Groundworks Collaborative. I believe that they would know because I think that they're putting it on. All right, Peter.
A quick supplement to that. I didn't otherwise have comments tonight, but just so that the instructions to the public are clear about the vigil, the reason that the chair made the reference to we might be here in this room is that the select board and I might need to have an executive session, in which case we would be here having that part of the meeting while the vigil is ongoing. But members of the public could, if you're interested, go to the vigil at 5:30 and be here at 6:15 for the public portion of the select board meeting.
Excellent. Thank you for that follow-up. Are there members of this board who have committee reports or comments that you'd like to bring up at this time?
No, thank you.
I don't at this time.
Okay. All right. Then I will move into public participation. For anybody who might be new to this process, this is your opportunity to speak about something that is not listed on tonight's agenda. We come up to the microphone in the middle of the room and we keep all comments to 2 minutes. We can't really interact with you because it's not publicly warned items, but we always do some minimal communication. With that, Dale, I've seen your hand go up a couple times. Feel free to, you know the drill, so you can set a good example.
My name is Dale Joy. A journalist for the Brattleboro Reformer ran a 2-part article with me as the angry parent of an overdosed son last week. The journalist failed to mention that I went back to him to retract the statement shortly after the first interview last fall. I explained to the journalist I had a change of heart and mind. I had calmed down enough to reason and research about the events that surrounded my son's death. My son was very well liked in town. The field examiner of my son's death, Archie Mayer, attested this to me. I knew my son was mentally ill with substance abuse, especially alcohol and steroids. I tried to get family and friends of my son to do an intervention. Many of them were in denial. They had their own alcohol and substance addictions and did not want to participate. I should have gone through with it on my own without them, which I explained to the journalist. The main point being, people with addictions who are most successful in getting off the drugs have interventions with people who love and care for them. This according to the professionals on addiction. This I learned too late. I was opposed to having prison being at the top of the list for people with addictions in possession of fentanyl. The addict is mentally ill. They need mental help, not prison. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. I'm sorry for the weight that you bear. You've been somebody that's interacted with us for at least the last few years that I've known you, and my heart is with you. Are there other members of our community who would like to speak on something that is not listed on tonight's agenda? Yes. Please step forward just as Dale did and introduce yourself into the microphone.
My name is Bruce Clausen.
That was Bruce Clausen, was that right? Okay.
I live on Green Street.
Me too.
I have a proposal. I think we should get on the agenda, please.
Okay, so, yeah, so Bruce is passing us a proposal for the agenda. It's okay. That's what we all have to do in this dry weather.
Thank you.
And then Bruce, is your plan to go back to the microphone and give a summary for the viewing audience and the people in this room? Thank you.
I have a personal input on this too, but I think we really need to start talking about the crisis that we have had the last couple of weeks, and it's an undeclared war with a nuclear power. But I read off of here. The people of Brattleboro humbly acknowledge the sacrifices of our troops. We remind the good officers that they solemnly swore to support and defend the Constitution, not the President of the United States.
Bruce, I hate to interrupt you. Can you speak up just a little bit? Only because that microphone doesn't amplify you, and our interpreters need to make sure they're getting all your words.
Okay, should I start over?
Yes.
We implore the vigilance against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and in accordance with the Nuremberg principles, we exhort them to refuse unlawful orders and to file charges against anyone giving an order to start a war of aggression or commit some other war crime. And people of the town of Brattleboro should raise funds for the legal defense of such heroes, and they deserve the thanks of our nation. The message has to get out to those that are going to be involved in this undeclared war, and they're already sending people over there. The Nuremberg principles are, I can read you the oath too, that the oath of office is quoted in its entirety. It's very short. I, blank, having been appointed an officer in the Army of the United States, as indicated above in the grade of blank, so do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign or domestic, that I will hear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservations or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties, the office upon which I am about to enter. This reminded me, when I first read this a couple days ago, this reminded me of, I'm sure most people remember the My Lai massacre. A helicopter pilot got out and he stopped the massacre. It would have been a whole lot worse, and he went against orders and he paid the price, and a lot of whistleblowers end up paying the price of their moral actions, and he finally did get the highest medal awarded, but it was after his death, after he did finish his service out, but of course he was not treated the same as a hero as he should have been, and this goes on countless times, and these people should be recognized for what they've stood for, and what I believe the Brattleboro should stand for. It's not right what goes on. Quickly, I'm so nervous. I think we should be proactive and start a fund to defend war crime whistleblowers, and I suggest we call it after the My Lai hero, Hugh Thompson Jr. Fund. He was awarded as the Soldier's Medal after his death, and it's the highest award for bravery, not involving direct contact with the enemy. But of course, he got between the enemy and, he stopped. He got on his helicopter, innocent civilians, to save them, and this was covered up for, I don't know how many years. I should have looked that up, 6, 7, 8 years. And nobody went to jail for it. At least they did have a trial. But we should recognize the risk that soldiers take to stop war crimes, and we could have a justice coordinator that could get this message out and send it to those that are in need of it. That's about it.
Thank you, Bruce.
I could write more on it.
Nice. You did. I appreciate where you stopped. So what the process is going to look like to get something on the agenda is you would reach out to the town manager's office, either to Peter or Jan, and they would put that request before Tim and I, and we sit down and we look at the agenda and we balance all items to make sure that nights aren't running all night and everything's being addressed, and we kind of go from there. Okay, so that's going to be your next step, is to reach out to the town manager's office. Excellent. Are there other community members in this room who would like to speak about something that is not listed on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing no hands, I will move us into our first order of business, and I would entertain a motion to become liquor commissioners.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. We are now liquor commissioners, and our first and only item of business is a first and third class liquor license for Duo Vermont LLC, doing business as Duo Restaurant. And I see we have members of Duo here, owner of Duo here. If you'd like to come over to our table, or however you want to do this. Just one.
Yeah, gotcha.
We have all these.
Hi, Jason.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm Jason Lively. I am in the process of buying Duo Restaurant from Keith Arnold, so this is a new liquor license under a new LLC for Duo Restaurant.
Wonderful, congratulations.
Thank you.
And since this is a new license, Peter, I'm going to go ahead and double check and make sure everything was filed properly and up to snuff with the town.
It absolutely is. So first of all, Mr. Lively has experience at Duo and operating under the existing licenses, and all the paperwork is in order for the transfer of the license and the operation under the new ownership. Been reviewed by all the applicable town staff and approved and recommended for your approval tonight.
Excellent. Do members of the board have questions or comments about specifically the liquor license aspect of Duo items this evening?
Specifically the license? No.
Excellent.
Is there anything you'd like to tell us about the operation of the restaurant that would interest the public?
I will probably be back up here on a further point in the agenda, but the restaurant it's been a huge success and has a special place in my heart, and I have the opportunity to take it over, and essentially it'll stay Duo Restaurant as it is, and just continue being a fixture of the town.
Thank you for that. This, Jason will be back up with us under an item that's regarding a small business assistant program loan. So you can ask questions of Jason at this time, or you can wait until then to see if you have questions or comments. Okay? Seeing no hands on any side of the room, I would entertain a motion to approve this first and third class liquor licenses.
So moved.
Thank you, Liz. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We'll see you in a little bit.
Okay.
I would now entertain a motion to adjourn as liquor commissioners.
All right.
Somebody besides Liz.
I'll make that motion.
Excellent. Tim has made that motion. All those in favor to adjourn? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, we now move into unfinished business, and our first item under unfinished business is a review of our 2019-2020 Select Board goals. Peter?
So the update, we do a quarterly update, as you know, and during the December meetings regarding the unfinished business on the budget, you specifically requested that this be on for this first meeting in January so that you could be reviewing the status of this year's goals as you were considering final decisions regarding the FY21 proposed budget. And so what's before you is, in fact, the standard update in the standard format. I would note that compared to some prior years, the board has accomplished, I think, a greater percentage of the goals and made really substantive progress on others. So we can go into any of them in greater detail that you'd like. I think in the interest of time, rather than highlighting what's in the report, I just note for the public that it's available online if folks want to see all the details. There's actually 20 different goals that are reflected here and specific information about each one. But if the board or the members of the public would like to discuss any aspect of this, I and other members of the staff who are here will be happy to help.
I have a comment. On page 2, energy efficiency and sustainability, item 3. regarding Southeastern Vermont transportation. I would suggest that our new sustainability coordinator review the operations of Southeastern Vermont Transportation and work with them to create any initiatives to make bus travel and its sustainability aspects more evident.
I would agree with that. Seems like a natural fit.
So noted.
David?
On page 1, under housing number 2, basically the same thing that Liz just said, that the sustainability coordinator should, early in their tenure, start looking into the housing situation.
For those in the room, that is determining if there's an appropriate town government role to collaborate with others in Brattleboro to address housing challenges. And I agree about having the sustainability coordinator add that to the plate. Better be a big plate.
It is.
All our hopes and dreams.
That's right. No pressure.
The only other question is on the second page under opioids crisis. We talked about additional town funding for Project CARE, and that's actually in the budget. It's not there because we haven't approved it yet. Once
Correct.
it's there, it goes in the bold print.
That's exactly right.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you.
And go ahead.
No, I was going to say no. I was going to pass it over.
I was just going to say that I appreciate this because I wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything that we were missing in terms of the budget. But I'm happy to see how much progress we've made.
Explains why I'm so tired. Kidding. That doesn't explain it. We all know.
It was
It's
a lot of
children.
work.
It's the children. I would definitely recommend community members to go on the website in general and poke around. And aren't the links, Jan, usually on the right-hand side if I'm staring at a computer screen for documentation such as this?
Once you get to the select board page, so on the left-hand side of the home page, there's a select board tab, and then you click on that, and there's all sorts of documents on the right-hand side.
Perfect. You're going to find documents regarding the budget we're looking at. You're going to find things like our annual select board goals, all of this kind of stuff that's really meaty and that we kind of just talk about because we've been doing it and you don't always have copies. Please go there and look at that.
And everything that's in this binder we look at, including this
Right.
plan, is in the supporting documents for that, whatever date the meeting is.
That's right. Daniel?
Yes, these are a good bunch of goals, and much has been done, and much remains to be done.
Well said. Okay. I don't know where to go from that. All right, so our next item under unfinished business, which I have for some reason skipped over, is continued review of said FY21 proposed budget. And our first item is Representative Town Meeting's Human Services Committee discussion. And so any and all members of the Human Services Committee can come up to our table, and if there's not enough chairs there, just shamelessly drag some over. Drag them on over.
Whole committee is here.
Excellent.
Thank you.
You have the perfect amount of chairs. Look at that.
There's 5 of us.
Oh, there's 5. Nope, bring some more chairs. Bring them all. Bring them all. It is awesome.
Rush, you got to zoom out.
That was most of our viewing community. Is on the table over here now. Or in the room viewing.
So good evening, I'm Ann Fielder.
Hi, Ann.
David Miner.
David.
Sue Graff.
John Kennedy.
Captain Tewksbury.
All right. I don't know who's kicking things off and how you want to kick it off, but I say whoever's in charge, just go for it.
Well, we're not sure why you invited us, so what would you like us to talk about? So we're here.
Peter's going to do it.
Yeah.
You're jumping it up here.
So in the
So we're not clear. We just heard you'd like us to come, so we
okay.
don't have anything prepared.
So it's on very peaceful terms. The board, when it was going its first pass through the budget, there came a time pretty late in that process because you were very busy with your own process for several weeks. There was a time when you were finished and had submitted your report to Jan to put into the town report to become the item for town meeting. When I advised the board that the recommendation you were making was slightly higher, higher by $4,510 versus the level at which it was funded last year for the whole wide variety of different programs that are supported by these appropriations. And because we as staff had prepared a proposed budget that was level funded for human services as a placeholder for awaiting your report, I advised them that the select board either should adjust the select board's budget before it goes to town meeting by increasing it by $4,510, or needed to recognize that there would be an inconsistency between your recommendation and the select board's proposed budget when town meeting was considering both items a few months from now. And the board decided that what it wanted to do was increase its budget by that amount, fully recommending what you were proposing, and at that same time said, wouldn't it be helpful if the members of the committee got an opportunity to come and, as part of a select board meeting in front of the BCTV community audience, have you give it an opportunity to describe your process and how rigorous it is and how you made the choices that you made and why you recommended the figure that you recommended.
We're happy to come. We had, I can't remember how many agencies, 30, 32, 33, and we funded all but 4. And I think we had over $70,000 more that was asked for than we gave. So we really felt the pressure. All of these agencies, as you know, are worthy. The issues that they're dealing with are fundamental and important. There's nothing there that shouldn't be funded or we don't care about. I know we all care about those things. So we had to make some hard decisions, and we ended up with this over, and we kept cutting, and we just felt like we were at a point where we couldn't cut anymore. So that's now the process. I would love Sue Graff, who helped us design the process this year that we used, which is we had a rubric that we used. Just talk about that because it really helped us. It was a very cogent, fair process that we used to come to this numbers. It wasn't just a conversation back and forth. We actually thought it out quite a bit. Sue, do you mind?
Not at all. So essentially the scoring process for the whole team, all team members scored every application unless there was a conflict of interest. So just so you can be assured that we recognize any conflicts of interest, but most applications were reviewed by 5 people, which is a pretty rigorous process. When I was at United Way, it was less than that, so just so you know. And the scoring mechanism was really about the categories of the application. So the application already asks organizations, and it's a pretty rigorous results-based accountability model. How much they do, sort of what is the program, how well do they do it? So, the quality of the staff, what are the results of the program, how do they evaluate how the program is working, and then is anyone better off? So, what are the long-term outcomes that the program or organization is accomplishing? And so the scoring really reflected what we were already asking in the application. So it was really just a reflection of how well the reviewers felt the organization represented its work and its impact on the people of Brattleboro. So things like how many people in Brattleboro were impacted by the program and how long the program's been established or what sort of outcomes the program could or the organization could express were evaluated sort of distinctly by all of us using a score of 0 to 5. Those were averaged. Then we came together as a group and went essentially from least successful application, lowest lowest score up to highest, and determined, based on that scoring and our conversation and the context, the level of funding support we really felt was appropriate. So that's where the not funding some organizations versus funding 100% versus a partial funding mix came into play. So everybody participated in that process of starting with a scoring mechanism and pretty rigorous review, and then having a conversation about what felt appropriate and comfortable based on how we could come to consensus around the quality of the application. So
how did the applicants feel about that methodology?
This is probably the first time they're hearing that that's how we did it.
Oh, okay.
Yes, because it's this committee's responsibility to do that review, and somebody else. I'm new to the committee, so there are certainly seasoned folks here beyond me that can speak to that relationship.
I've been on the committee for a number of years, and I think that what Sue put together and proposed was kind of the formalization of the process that we went through, before. So, providing kind of weighting to the various measurements, and it was very helpful in the process. I think the one thing that surprised us this year were the number of new applicants. There were 6 or 7, I think, brand new, and the amount of the request. It was the most ever, just short of $250,000. So there was a lot of work to do. I think organizations in the past that we could very easily make the decision to grant 100% of what they requested. We had to pair in order to be able to meet, kind of retain, some sort of measurement to the budget. But so it was a very difficult process that we went through.
I can't imagine.
Last year there were a couple of people who were late, and that kind of put a monkey wrench in things. Was anyone late this year?
Yes.
So what happened to the late comers?
Well, you want to talk about the post office issue? Well,
there were a variety of different concerns. We did not reject out of hand anyone because they were late, but it is a problem. We established the requirement not to be ornery. I mean, the idea is to kind of create some sort of order and process to what's done. But I think that the late applications, there were very legitimate reasons for it. Some as odd as the post office taking a next day delivery and getting it here 5 days later. So maybe 3 days. But in any event, there were a variety of different reasons, and so we did accept them all.
Yeah. Thank you. Further questions on the board at this second? Otherwise, I know somebody has a question out there.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you for being here. I think one of the reasons I really thought it would be great for you all to come in is that this whole process is sort of an anomaly in the way we do things here, because it's part of our budget, and yet the committee is a town meeting committee and process. So I think it's really important for the public to understand how the process happens. Because what happens is, as we all know at town meeting, it tends to be a bit of a jumble if everyone doesn't have faith in the process, and the hours and hours that you all go through looking at everything is so much appreciated. And I want everybody in the public to understand that huge process, because often the temptation at town meeting is to tweak and to look at line-by-line question marks and things like that. So I think having you appear hopefully will work out in the long run for a non-13-hour town meeting. Who knows? But not that it was human services last time.
2 of our members are town meeting members too.
Sure. And we're as we are. But we're just looking for people to understand, or I'm looking for people to understand how difficult the process, understand how much work is put into it. And so maybe if you want to comment on that.
We receive, the 35 whatever applications, and each of the members of the committee read each application. so that we have an understanding as to what it is. The rating program that Sue described is something new, but it does help kind of organize the thought process in your mind as to the organization, what they're asking for, and the needs that they're looking to meet. We then go and, as a whole committee, review and discuss each application, so that make sure that we're all kind of seeing it somewhat in the same light, and everyone understands where you are. And after we rated them, everyone submitted their ratings separately, and then ended up with a kind of a tabulated summary, so that we could all see where we were. And in some cases, there were organizations had high ratings and as well as low, so we were able to talk about those. And then we, as Sue described, walked through all of the requests and the amount of the grant that was being requested, and then put together some numbers. And we did that through 3 or 4 meetings.
We also wrote up our process, so we also want the process to be transparent. I think I don't want to speak for the group, but that was very important to us, and I was not involved last year, but certainly heard from the committee some of the the interesting aspects of last year's process. So I think we all want the same thing and want the public and the applicants to understand the process, and so we wrote it up. We would encourage it to be posted on the website as the application is and the application process is. So that's another piece of the puzzle that hopefully will help people understand what we go through. And I guess, I don't know, I want to speak for the whole group, but I would also invite the town meeting committee or group that oversees our work to help guide our work if needed. I think that's also a piece of it, is we're open to guidance from the folks that we're responsible to, the public, of course, but the town meeting committee, if and when that is something that they want to provide. So.
Would the rubric criteria, I'm not necessarily looking for like the scores you each gave each application, but like at least the template of the rubric be available to town meeting members to see? I think that would be.
And that was provided to, I believe, to Jane. So.
I'm not sure we gave the rubric, the process and procedures, but we can give you the rubric.
And it could be posted on the website.
Go in the
And I'm sure that would help with understanding of the town meeting reps.
The other thing is that in reviewing, there was uniformity, and there were a couple of agencies that were one person felt strongly for or against, but generally speaking, there was uniformity. When we submitted our scores, Dave tabulated them, and we all looked, and we were pretty much in the same range right through the process, which made it a lot easier to have the discussion about where consensus was. And we ended up with the groupings in 3 groups, and made the recommendations based on that.
Right.
Can I ask an annoying question? If you could do it all again, what would you do differently?
I'm sorry,
what would you do differently if you could do it all again?
Are you asking a money question? Is that what you said?
No, not a money question, an annoying question.
Oh, an annoying question. Okay.
I mean, it might be a money question.
Is that a Welsh question?
We had an incredible year this year because
It's an evaluation
I asked Sue Graff, who's worked for United Way for years, to come onto the committee. And while we were doing things, we weren't codifying them in years before. And she really helped us to develop a process that's easy to explain rather than, before it was, we did all those things, but we didn't have a rubric.
Okay.
And now we have a rubric that we can show you.
Yeah.
So I really want to thank Sue for coming onto the committee and with all her experience with United Way. So I wouldn't do anything differently this year. It was really just a great process, and I feel really good about it.
Great.
And I think what was encouraging as somebody who's been on the committee for a long time, the fact that Kip, John, and Sue joined the committee new this year is great, because they brought a lot of enthusiasm and a different set of eyes to the process, and it was very helpful.
David?
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you and invite those of you that have not been town meeting reps in the past to see the town clerk, get a petition, get 10 of your neighbors to sign, and then come and see the sausage made.
I like that
Three of us might do that. Yeah.
I think we're helping make.
Because you're already part of the sausage.
That's good.
We have some ingredients, for sure.
So Tim, you wanted to say something
Yeah.
that I'd like to get out to Franz.
So this is not necessarily the moment to have this discussion because I think it's more of a representative town meeting discussion to have. But anybody looking at the numbers that we're spending on human services knows that it's taken a few leaps in the last few years. To their credit, town meeting has been generous with the amount given for a few years in a row. And a few years back, I think it was Emily Kornheiser who stood up and took a little straw poll. It wasn't official at all, but at the end of one of the town meetings, I think it was 2 years ago, she said, does anybody, could I just get a show of hands who would approve a 1% target funding level, 1% of the town budget target level for funding, and there was a lot of consensus that sounded like a good idea. But what this budget does recommend, just so people know, is slightly above 1% level. And now that we're past Grinch season, I feel comfortable in saying that I'd like to advocate for that level going forward so that we don't have 26,000, 23,000 yearly leaps happening for the taxpayers because we have to control the amount of spending.
Are you suggesting a 1%, a flat 1%, or the same as we did this year going forward?
It's not a proposal because it's not the appropriate place to make it. But my idea is that we would sort of cap it for now, let the 1% mark catch up with current spending because it's a little over, and then go forward. But this is something we can talk about further in town meeting. I don't want to, make town meeting representatives think that I'm trying to control the discussion from here.
Right.
So, but I just want to throw that out there that I think it's a reasonable discussion to have because taxpayers have limits, as everyone knows.
So you're suggesting that we somehow get on that warning, an item that could be voted on by the town meeting?
I'm not suggesting any.
That would be us.
That would be us. We put an actual amount on the town meeting warning, and then town meeting has the authority to move it from there.
I was thinking of the straw poll that Emily had done, whether and would it be we town meeting reps who would, if we wanted to make that sort of an official guideline for the representative town meeting, would that have to come from the town meeting reps itself? So that's why I was wondering.
It would have to be warned.
Yeah, well, that's all.
Which would be us unless you want to get a petition.
Yeah, I think it would even help the committee to have some sort of guideline like that, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I'd like to say something.
So I'm just throwing that out there, and I'm not asking for consensus among this board or anything like that, but I think it's a healthy conversation.
So you will see in the process and procedures that we presented to the town that we were using the 1% as a guideline.
Yep. Okay.
And so we kind of stuck, within the context of the guideline.
Sure.
If you want to make it a brick wall, and say, okay, you can go up to that, then that's something a little bit different.
Liz?
But
sorry. Continue with your thought.
I certainly respect that the 1% is a guideline, and I think one of the reasons why we asked you to come was so that you could explain, your process, because when it goes over the 1%, there's a rhyme and a reason to it, and so that's why you're here, and that's why now that it's great that you have this rubric so that we can explain that going forward, and we don't have to stick to the 1% because we have a reasonable basis for your decision making, and that's really all we're asking of you.
Franz? Thank you.
Franz Reichsman from the Representative Town Meeting Finance Committee. I feel sort of kinship as a member of the other town meeting standing committee that does its work somewhat in the shadows, not always with a lot of participation, but then comes forward at this time of year with recommendations or decisions of one sort or another. So, hi there, and thanks for the work. And I got a few different things, a couple of sort of short-term questions. One is a little bit longer-term question. First of all, in the minutes of your November 19th meeting, it makes reference to a spreadsheet that would have, I don't know exactly what, but it was going to be sent out to committee members by December 2nd. And I don't know if that spreadsheet has made its way to other town organizations, but it hasn't made its way to me, and I was wondering if we have copies of that or somehow. And I didn't see it in the...
This one?
Yeah, I didn't see it
Yeah,
on
it's
the...
in the backup materials.
It is.
Tonight, yeah.
In the green binder, not the blue
Okay,
binder.
I did not find it in
It's with
the
the
old
budget.
business. The only thing it said the budget is a separate matter, and it was not, I didn't see it in the packet
And then
tonight's
after
meeting.
that, there
But
was-
we can straighten that out, and if it
Okay.
could be made more visible for others, I think that would be good too. Thanks. Also, the rubric, which I think sounds really good, I'm going to go one step further than Daniel and say that I would actually like to see the data, if possible, not just the rubric itself, but what the numbers were, and be able to go over that. Not so much to make a specific decision, but just to feel comfortable with how the whole thing worked for you this year. So I don't know if there's a good way to compile that and make it available, but it would be sort of transparency after the fact in addition to the transparency of the process itself. So, hi, Liz.
I'm not in favor of that because I think the deliberations of the committee, just like the deliberations of the finance committee, should be held within their group, and the results are what's promulgated in the spreadsheet.
Oh, I disagree with that. I think as part of the open meetings law and just in general for transparency, all our meetings are open to the public. All your meetings are open to the public. I don't see that there's any level of secrecy needed. Anyway, I don't mean to try to settle that right now. It's really just a request from me at this point.
David?
I agree, Franz. I would ask that you consider asking the committee to do that next year instead of trying to recreate it from this year's practice.
Okay, if it's not easily available, like I say, I don't have a specific reason that I need this. I just think it would be a good idea, and if it were available, I would look at it.
Franz, there was a member of your committee that attended every one of our meetings.
Yes, that's right. I was sort of hoping that David would be here.
Yeah.
I think he's traveling out of town at the moment.
So he has a copy of the rubric, and he attended every meeting.
Does he have a copy of the numbers that went into the rubric, do you know?
No.
I'll talk to him about it.
Okay.
But my point stands that I think it would be useful, not just for me and the committee, but if there's a good way to make that available to people who are interested, I think that would be good. Also, the longer-term thing is, it was a little sort of haphazard at town meeting last year because you guys had done so much work on putting together your proposal, and then people had so many suggestions about let's do this, let's do that, and it made some of us think about, well, why do we have this committee in the first place? And in part, at least my understanding, is that it's to avoid having the necessity to go over everything point by point by point at town meeting, which may have been done in older times, but could certainly be a very cumbersome process now. So what I'm wondering, Margaret got up at the meeting and said a little, she just seemed bewildered by, well, why are we doing all this if then now we have to justify all the different things and have people come up with different proposals. I was very sympathetic to the position she expressed at that time. So I'm wondering, for this year, whether that had an effect on your thinking this year in terms of how you went about things. Was that, did you go back and think about that as you were talking this year of what the process was like last year?
Well, the only difference it made was that there was more money awarded after that meeting, which kind of left us wondering, was that a new starting point? Because we had submitted a much lower number, and it was, I can't remember how much, but it was several $1,000s more. And so I think we just started with that number that was awarded by town meeting, feeling like this is what people want to do. We're very aware of the taxpayer burden, and we're trying to keep things at this one level, and then all of a sudden it jumped up. So we then built from there. So in that way, it did affect us. But I think that was the only thing I can think of.
I think the one big thing was the 1%. I mean, we had never been given a guideline by the town meeting before.
Fair enough.
And so I think by kind of establishing that 1%, yes, that was new.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it was actually somewhat helpful, perhaps.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Do you think it would be worthwhile to somehow try to reinvigorate the idea that the work that you've done on this is intended to ease the burden at town meeting? Is that, it just seemed like the process last year was longer than maybe it needed to be. I don't know. I'm just wondering if you were planning on saying anything about it this year, perhaps.
Well, part of last year was because two agencies that were late submitting their applications and were therefore no recommendation by the committee then was made for them, put themselves separately on the warning. So suddenly that split apart and brought into question, I guess, the effectiveness or utility of the committee. So I don't know, as long as that's always a possibility for an organization that, not a case this year, but going forward, as you say, if, because kind of the only limitation we have is the deadline for when they have to have their application in. If someone's late again, the way it's set up now, they could still put themselves on the warning as a separate item, and then we would have opened up the whole process as it did last year.
Okay, I think that's, yeah.
Had that not happened, I think it would have gone as previous years have, that it just pretty much we approved it, maybe asked some questions.
Okay. I was just thinking of some way to reaffirm your role somehow. That's all. A very vague thought in my mind, but just sort of a reminder that you're there for a reason and that people would do well to think about that.
I think that's on all of us. You, us, the select board, on our pages, that, to say, like, here's the information that's going to, the rubric will be available, the template's available, please watch this part of the meeting. That's on all of us to try to
I
bring
think
clarity.
the rubric will go
I
a
do
long
too.
way to explaining your process and respecting the system.
And then after that, it's only so much we can do. They can still say everything's
Town meeting wants to.
It's a free-for-all.
Yes, thanks for those comments. And so I just want to express my concern on that, and hopefully having the rubric available will go a long way, and getting the applications in on time is a big plus too.
So
anyway.
can you send the rubric to Jan?
Are there further questions or comments from members of the board or members of the community or members of the committee on anything? Anything you feel like hasn't been said? Anything we feel like hasn't been asked? Any questions that have propped up for?
Well, it's our pleasure to be here, and I hope this was helpful to
I think it was helpful.
to the board and to the people who are watching at home.
That's where I'm most concerned about the helpfulness. So thank you so much for fitting us in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for the work you do.
Yes, that's no kidding. All right. Turn my binder in the correct direction now. So we are still under unfinished business. We are still under review of the FY21 proposed budget. We move now to item 2, which is fund balance guideline. Peter?
Thank you. So the board asked for a reminder about the sort of best practice advice behind this guideline. Why is it that we have a 10% guideline that was adopted here in town several years ago? And specifically asked us to check about what other municipalities nearby and throughout Vermont are doing. And so we have the information that's presented in my memorandum to you that was backup for this evening's meeting has summaries of both the findings in both areas. So on best practice, the Government Finance Officers Association recommends a minimum of 2 months operating revenues and expenses as the benchmark for a minimum appropriate unassigned fund balance. And that would be 17%, 16.7% of the general fund operating budget would meet that standard. When we looked at what's going on around us, we found that there was a variety of different guidelines that have been adopted by the 8 communities that we looked at. We looked at Greenfield and Keene, and then 6 throughout the state of Vermont that are relatively comparable in size and complexity to Brattleboro. And what we found was 4 of the 8 communities didn't have a guideline at all. And the other 4 ranged between 10%, like we are, and 25%, and with an average of 16.5% from among those 4 communities. So right on, the average was right on the GFOA standard, recommended standard, but there was a municipality that aligned with our 10%. What this tells to staff, and I should say that the actual unassigned fund balance in the different communities varied between 24.3% and actually a negative balance with an average of 8.2. Our staff advice to the board in considering, what does this information mean to us, is that while we wouldn't recommend that our 10% guideline be increased, we certainly think that it's important for us to adhere to it. We think it is it's below the recommended minimum standard, and for the occasions when we might fall below 10% in an actual, fall below our guideline in terms of what's actually set aside, that should be for extraordinary circumstances and not a general practice.
Yeah, for as liberal as I am in so many things, my 10 years in banking cringes about going below 10%. I could handle 9% for a little while. 8.2 would make me very cringy.
And what does our current budget?
The budget that's before you recommends 10%. It meets just exactly the standard. So there's a use of fund balance that we've recommended that represents the amount of money in the unassigned fund balance that is above and beyond the 10% marker.
Which is fine. Yeah. Okay.
And as usual, we've recommended that to be part of the transfer to capital, not just blended into the operations of the town.
Right. Okay.
Can I ask you? Does anybody wonder who the 25% is? Do you mind disclosing who that is? I'm just curious.
They're rolling in it.
Who pulls that off?
So there's...
I go for Keene.
It depends on whether you're asking about the standard or the actual.
Actual.
Keene has an actual of 24.3%. St. Johnsbury has adopted a standard of 25%.
Okay.
And did they meet it?
They are not currently meeting it.
I actually, and you'll like this comment because I know you don't like us to mess with
fund balance is my thing, yeah.
I know, and I respect that, even though
He thinks it's fun.
Everybody has to get excited about something. Preserving fund balance for
the fun
crisis
fund
situations.
Nice.
But I laughed out loud when I read this because I thought it was unfair of you to include the 0 to negative balance in the averaging.
Oh,
No, you did, didn't you?
We didn't mean to.
You said with an average of 8.2%. Now, you must be...
I'm sorry, it's an average of the ones in positive balance, which is 8.2.
Oh, good. I took that to mean you were counting...
No, I didn't mean to exaggerate the results.
Okay, good.
I found it actually...
That would be
I found it a concern, actually, that the majority of the communities are, whether it's consciously or due to circumstances, is why we didn't name communities in the materials, because we don't know what would fairly represent what's actually going on there. But the fact that a majority of the 8 are not adhering to their own self-imposed guideline was a concern to me, just in terms of healthy, responsible management of municipal finances.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm happy with the 10%, and I'm also happy that if we have a surplus at the end of any year, that we're applying it to the capital projects, which is saving us terrific amounts of money.
This end of the table?
Certainly.
It's great. Love it.
I like it too. Love it.
I knew it was keen.
Franz? Didn't raise your hand, but I heard you raise your hand in your brain.
Yes, my hand was waving. So it's all well and good and useful information, and thank you. I wonder if members of the Select Board and the administration have seen the article that appeared in Vermont Digger on November 21st, written by David Fleming, titled "Vermont Towns in Fiscal Trouble," which gave a summary of the fiscal position according to certain criteria from an academic person, and found that some towns seemed to be in very good shape, other towns in less good shape. It had some critical, not so much remarks as data to indicate that Brattleboro is not in such good shape. And if you looked further, I think the biggest strike against Brattleboro, from the perspective of this analysis, was fund balance, and that it was at such a low level that we got low marks for that, and it took points away and put us in the bad group, although just barely.
Were you interviewed for that, Peter?
No.
Oh.
So anyway, this is a article really worth reading. I'm not saying that we should subscribe to its methodology completely, but I think it's really worth knowing about. And it also gives references to the underlying academic material on which it was based. And I think that stuff is also worth looking at least to understand the assumptions better. So anyway, I would put that on the table for something for you guys to look at. If you'd like, I can send a
send it out.
link.
That would be helpful.
I'm never going to remember the date that you cited, so if you send that
a
out,
couple
that'd be
months
great.
ago.
It's an article, not a commentary, right?
It was.
Well, Peter wasn't
No, I
interviewed
think it's
for
a
it.
commentary. Oh, it's definitely a commentary. And it's definitely, it's from the Ethan Allen Institute, and I know all of you are subscribers to their podcasts, et cetera.
Yeah. I'm always loving everything.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
talk about.
All the more reason to take a look at it.
To not look at it.
No. All the more reason to take a look at it, because it is actually something that I think is substantive from people who maybe have an opposite point of view.
Thank you.
Thank you, Franz.
Indeed.
Further discussion on fund balance. All right, in the effort of RFBA, just moving things along to our next item under the proposed budget. Item 3 is Police Department's contract with Axon for body-worn camera services. Hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. And we have with us tonight Chief Fitzgerald and Captain Kerrigan. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks for coming tonight.
My pleasure. The first thing I'd like to do is, in the administrative packet, it says that Axon is increasing the town storage costs. We're purchasing additional storage, Vice, Exxon increasing. And basically what we're asking for is 2 terabytes of storage. And initially in my proposal to the board in my budget was a $3,000 increase in my equipment line, and part of that increase was the storage line. And what I didn't do, which I apologize, is I didn't break it down per se all the way down that $3,000. I basically took the lion's share of that $3,000 and said it was the storage.
Yeah.
And what we're having a problem with is storage. It's really not a problem. It's just we have to keep use of force incidents and all criminal activity for a period of 7 years.
Right.
And any non-criminal activity that is videoed, and our officers are live every time they interact with the citizen. So every time they, do a motor vehicle stop and just any interaction they have with citizens, we have the cameras. Right now, my policy is that it's 90 days, that we keep that for 90 days. And we initially started off and we went out there with 20 plus cameras, and our storage just rapidly filled up. And bottom line is we didn't buy enough in the beginning to foresee this. And I didn't think that we would have reached the level that we reached in such a short time, within a year. So we can look at our policy, and we're not going to see anything deleted currently for at least 7 years.
Right.
In use of force or criminal activity. It will not be deleted for 7 years. So the only wiggle room that we have is pretty much in non-criminal activity. Currently, my policy is 90 days. We have discussed the pros and cons of limiting that to 60 days or 30 days. But one of my biggest concerns is, I got to weigh that against the public perception, transparency. Every time they come at 31 days, it's, we don't have the video, we don't have the video, we don't have the video. Whereas at 90 days, if there was going to be a citizen's complaint against the officers, more than likely it's within the 90-day period, which is fortunate for us because then we can pull down the video. At the department, it's probably like on a 30-day loop in between, give or take. So we have run into instances where people have come in and asked for video footage of the lobby area, and we didn't tape it down, so it got overwritten. And I don't want to be in that predicament when officers are dealing with citizens. So we're asking for additional 2 terabytes of storage. And that comes off a little bit, about $1,600 is the 2 terabytes of storage. Now with that storage, we also get a lot of services from Axon that is probably not needed for your average homeowner. The security is unbelievable, obviously, for obvious reasons. We also have the ability to identify certain individuals within a video and have those redacted. So if we went to a house and there was a child, and then someone came in later on with a public records request and said, I want to see the video of you at this residence, we obviously don't want to release video with children in it.
Right.
So we could go through and redact the faces of the children. So they have that ability going on with it. Also has the ability where it expands our clerks, gives them a lot more time to where we now give access to the state's attorneys and the prosecutors to the videos. Where in the past we had to manually download all our videos and then hand carry them over to the state's attorney's office. Now what we do under the storage program is our clerks just simply have to tag what videos go with that case, upload those, and then what we do is contact the state's attorney's office and give them access just to those videos.
Right.
So that has greatly increased, or I should say decreased, the time that our clerks have to spend preparing cases for that.
Goodness.
Also within that line item is we are, hopefully we're getting a lot more, but we have 2 officers that are getting off FTO in March, and we have another one going to the academy in February. So we're buying additional cameras, and those are $500 a piece. We're getting 2 for $1,000. And for those cameras, the user license is $188 a piece times 2, which is $360 for approximately $2,960 is how I came with that equipment increase of $3,000.
Got it.
And I do apologize for the board for not being more clear initially when I did my budget proposal on exactly how that broke down with the Axon and $3,000.
I appreciate your clarification tonight. I accept your apology because you gave it, but I didn't feel like it was needed at all. I mean, record retention is a thing. I know that pretty well. You feel good about the 2 terabytes?
I do.
Good.
I do.
Yeah.
Because we're really going to look at the on where we're going with the video. Like yourself, I am a big fan of body-worn cameras on police officers.
Me too.
I think that it is a good, positive thing to have, and we should do everything to promote that.
So every time I've talked to an officer, even when I'm hanging on the street, the camera's been on?
No.
Okay, because sometimes I use some colorful language.
Sure. If they're out walking around, no, if they're downtown, just walking around,
chatting.
They're not on.
Okay.
But as soon as they do a law enforcement action, they will turn it on.
Excellent, good to know.
So you're safe.
Good. Board members have questions or comments or need help sleeping at night like I just did, but I feel better now.
Well, I just think it's a necessary expense, and I applaud you for it, and I think it's necessary for communication and transparency.
I agree.
Certainly worth it.
Transparency is what it's all about. Members of the community who are here tonight have questions or comments about the extra storage and extra body-worn cameras needed for officers coming on? Ricky?
Hi, I'm Ricky from District 2, and I wasn't available to speak earlier during public participation, but I wanted to take this opportunity to offer these CBD joints that I rolled to the board so that they could have an example of a sample to taste of tax-free weed that they may enjoy, the benefits in comparison to maybe taxed weed from other places.
Wow.
Always a first. I'm gonna decline. I think we'll probably decline.
Well, yeah.
The very thin micro mini ones, yeah.
No, thank you.
This is the best night. Do you want to
Appreciate the
ask
offer.
anything about the body-worn cameras or the extra storage for the record retentions?
I thank you for taking responsibility and initiating that and following through with that.
Heck yeah.
You're welcome.
And yeah, no apology you need it for, who knows how much storage we need, this kind of stuff. All right, so I'm feeling like we're ready to move into Project Care.
Thank you very much.
Stay with us.
Thank you. Yep.
I have a few talking points that I would like to address the board and the community about Project Care. And a little bit is things that you have already heard before, but I think they warrant being mentioned again. And it's just for my support of funding this program. 2019 was another challenging year for the Brattleboro Police Department in responding to the opiate crisis. The town of Brattleboro is not alone in this, as the amount of people overdosing and dying from opiates has been steadily increasing every year throughout the United States. Making the challenge more difficult has been the prevalence of fentanyl, an opiate 25 to 50 times more potent than heroin. The Brattleboro Police Department responded to 116 overdose incidents in 2019. That is 15 more than in 2018, with 10 of those being fatal, which is one less than the previous year. Without the intervention of community partners and initiatives, this fatality number would undoubtedly be higher. Project CARE is a community partnership developed to address this public health crisis. The current goal of Project CARE is to reduce the impact opiate use is having on our community, businesses, and reduce the amount of deaths resulting from the misuse of opiates and other drugs. Project CARE team meets on a monthly basis and includes representatives from the Brattleboro Police Department, trained recovery coaches from Turning Point, Brattleboro Memorial Hospital, Groundworks, Habit Opco, Brattleboro Retreat, HCRS, and Probation and Parole. In a preventative approach, we continue to conduct bi-weekly community outreach with a combination of law enforcement officers, recovery coaches, and groundworks employees. Our outreach is aimed at the areas and people identified as being most at risk. We also follow up with victims of drug overdoses within 24 to 48 hours of the incident. Additionally, this year, a work group was formed and currently meets bi-weekly to discuss case studies. In doing so, we identify those most at risk in the community, talk to them about the services available, and try to coordinate a response that meets their specific needs. To date, at least 37 people have completed intake forms. Our records indicate that out of these 37 people, 32 have engaged in treatment. Access and transportation to treatment facilities is always an obstacle to success and treatment. Recovery coaches transported approximately 32 people to treatment facilities this year. In support of this program, the Brattleboro Police Department has been able to provide rides to in-town treatment facilities. This year, we also initiated a new program at the Brattleboro Police Department where prisoners are transported from our lockup to medicated assisted treatment facilities in town. This has been made possible through our partnership with Habit OPCO and the Brattleboro Retreat through the Hub and Spoke program. Since the beginning of the year, 11 people have been transported for treatment. In line with our mission statement, we continue to separate those that are in need of our help from those victimizing our community. We continue to endorse diversion programs and promote justice alternatives in lieu of incarceration in the case of minor drug possession. In regards to those who choose to victimize the members of our community with the sale of dangerous drugs and commit violent crimes, enforcement efforts continue to run parallel to our outreach efforts. Throughout the year, we team with state and federal law enforcement agencies to conduct both high and low visibility enforcement operations in the areas most affected by the opiate crisis. Sometimes the success stories of Project CARES are not known because they're no longer visible. Many of the individuals that Project CARE recovery coaches have worked with are now in recovery and thriving within our community. Many have either become mentors or volunteered to become recovery coaches themselves. In December of this year, a ceremony was held recognizing Project CARE recovery coaches for the positive impact they have had on our community. Currently, Project CARE is unfunded and strictly volunteer-based. With the approval of the $16,000 proposed, we can ensure the continuation of services to the most vulnerable in our community. The breakdown would be as follows. For recovery coaches, 15 hours a week working with law enforcement in the community, conducting outreach initiatives, and following up with those who have experienced an overdose. That would be a total of 780 hours per year at $15 an hour, which would be a total of $11,700. Transportation. If you're going to be reimbursed for travel costs, it would cost approximately $75 to $100 round trip, and that's based on the 55 cents per mile, to transport an individual to a treatment facility outside of Brattleboro. Last year, we transported 32 individuals, and unfortunately, the need appears to be growing. The remaining $4,000 will be earmarked for reimbursement for transportation costs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I can attest in my previous work that transportation is an issue. Sometimes you don't think you have a bed for somebody for a week, and then randomly one opens that day or the next day, and trying to scramble to find somebody, a volunteer specifically, that can just jump up and drive somebody to Bradford, Vermont, and do a round trip basically on the spot is pretty challenging, to say the least. And most people are going to Bradford or in that area. Would you say that that's a fair statement for me to say?
I would. The Serenity House or Valley Vista, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Comments? questions?
Yeah, I'm really proud to live in this town and to have this police department do this work and the partnerships that you're involved in. So, thank you.
Me too.
Thank you.
I think you can see from looking at other towns' data around the overdoses resulting in death. I think for sure you can see the difference of a coordinated effort that we have in Brattleboro versus people who are probably not having a coordinated effort or not having enough Narcan put to the streets. I think that, to me, the data is really common sense. And I'd like to also remind the public that these OD stats that you quoted are ones that the police were actually, or emergency services were actually called to.
That is correct.
And not ones that happened in somebody's home or in a location around town that person was able to be saved through Narcan. So it's a big deal in this community, and I think it's amazing that it's gone on unfunded, and I think it's time for that to stop.
Definitely.
Feels very important for the health of our community. And thank you also for the work coordinating with different agencies. I mean, the cooperation that we see is terrific, and should be a model for a lot of towns that aren't as lucky with their staff.
Are other towns doing a similar type of effort?
We're based on what is called the PARI model out of Gloucester, Massachusetts. And basically what that is you take the basic concept that we have and you model it and mold it to your community, what your community can support and what your community needs are. And we do attend their conferences. I send Lieutenant Petlock, Detective Line, and then 2 members from Project CARE. We do send them down to their conference every year in Boston. And they come back with some really good, innovative ideas. It's like a whole collection of people that are very excited about the positive work that's being done in this area. And they come back charged. I mean, that's how we got with the bi-weeklies, where before we were just meeting monthly and kind of like just trudging our way through this and trying to figure it out. And the networking that they have done through that conference, where you can just pick up the phone and call and say, hey, what do you think about this? And the ideas of us going to these treatment facilities to introduce ourselves, instead of us just picking up the phone saying, hey, you got a bed. No. Now it's kind of like on a first name basis. And just little things like that. And, you know, certainly I'll accept all the praise that you want to give the police department. But let's be perfectly honest, this was a community effort, hands down, where we put out the cry that we needed help, and the response was absolutely overwhelming from not only just the agencies that I mentioned in my report, but from the community as a whole.
Thank you.
I'd like to also thank you for enacting the policy to transport people to Habitatco and the hub for treatment, having seen what happens when people are missing their doses. It's pretty horrific on their bodies, and I really appreciate the transports. Thank you.
It just didn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
You know, on a Friday, now you have to be enrolled in the program.
Right, yeah.
You know,
right.
So like on a Friday and you're not going to see the judge until Tuesday, or if Monday happens to be a holiday.
Yeah.
You know, 3 days and you're on a medically assisted treatment with no medicine.
Yeah.
That to me borderlines inhumane.
I agreed.
You know.
So thank you for stepping up to that.
So we'll incorporate the $16,000 into the budget for the next time that you see the update.
Yeah,
Great.
when we get our
Definitely.
next set of numbers, we'll
Excellent.
add that to it.
Will do.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very
much. Chief Fitzgerald. All right. Keeping on the topic of the budget and the topic of vulnerable citizens in the community, but also just the community in a whole, we move on to discussing item 5, which is porta potties and more permanent pottying solutions downtown.
So included within the budget that we proposed back in the first week of November is $10,000 which would be sufficient for another summer of putting the porta potties back out in the 3 locations where we had them this this summer. We do think that that is an important action for the town to keep taking, both as a service to individuals who don't have any other place to go to the bathroom during the nighttime hours, and as a general convenience and a matter of general public health for the benefit of the whole community. It was something that emerged unexpectedly this past June. We knew that it needed quick action. We took that action even though it was an unbudgeted expense. The units that we have are old, but they're serviceable. So in the absence of any action by the board, we're positioned to be able to repeat that and to put them out earlier this year, when the weather gets warm, and so the conditions are ready for them to be placed at the 3 locations, at the Preston lot and the High Grove lot and at the Common. We will put them back out. But during the course of the discussions around various aspects of the budget, we called out to you that we had learned some things about more permanent public bathroom solutions, and you asked for more details about that. And Andrew Gominski from the planning department is here. He's compiled the information that's in your backup materials tonight. So there's specific information here about the Portland Loo, and also about a more fully enclosed option that's constructed up in Canada and Quebec. Those are 2 things we know quite a lot about. We don't know any funding sources yet. We're on the lookout for grant funding because the one option is on the order of $150,000 per unit. The other can be upwards of $200,000 per unit. So these do not come cheap, but it is something that we're on the lookout for, and we'll bring information back to you if we see an opportunity to use someone else's money to accomplish this important community need. Based on knowing that we're positioned to continue with the porta potties and that we're on the lookout for more opportunities related to the permanent installation, we don't need any further direction from the board tonight, but we're happy. Andrew's here. He's going to be presenting to you later regarding the neighborhood program that the state has started. Will be the final item on tonight's agenda. So if you want to know more about the research that we've done to date or want to have a further discussion, we're happy to assist in that.
I mean, he's here. Let's hear about it. Come on, you did all this work.
Table?
Let's at least get
Come
some.
to our table. All right, you kick it off.
Hi, Andrew. I thought it was a really interesting bit of research, and I'd love for you to tell the people at home who aren't sitting there with binders more about it.
Sure. So I guess starting with the 2 models that we did look at, other than the current porta potties, is the Portland Loo, which was made, developed out of the city of Portland, Oregon. It's kind of an industrial kind of style unit. It's a single unit, unisex. Everyone can use it. It's stainless steel. It's easy to clean. It's not automated in terms that it doesn't clean itself. You still need someone to go out there and clean it every day, and of course stocking it. But it is. In terms of preventing crime, they're called louvers, and they're the top and bottom. It's just basically open slits, so it still kind of creates this environment of privacy, but at the same time, police officers can see if there's illicit activity occurring in that unit itself. They're also timed, so it limits how long you can be in it. They're 24 hours. And they really fit to all environments, I would say, in terms of locating it and also connecting to utilities such as water and sewer. The Urban Blue model, which is out of Canada, is, I would say, it's very modern in terms of what you can do with it. It's self-cleaning. You don't need to have that servicing other than stocking it itself. In terms of crime preventing, it is graffiti resistant in terms of the material that's used, but you could get away with multiple people in the unit, but at the same time, it is also timed for use. And also the models that I sent in the memo, there's 3 different units you can look at, and basically the increase in price is just because there's one unit and there's one with 2 units and 3 units, but it's all one building. So that's something to consider in terms of how many units we would have in the future. You could potentially buy one and there's 3 right there, and then obviously with Portland Loo, if you wanted more than one, we're talking more money. So they are quite the investment in our staff. We are still looking for funding resources. From what we've seen so far, it seems like a lot of what's been done in other jurisdictions is through private-public partnerships. Other than that, I can answer any further questions you have.
I have questions about
Sure.
wintertime.
Yes.
So the Portland one looks chilly.
Yes.
Most
it is
of you.
true. And the other unit would definitely be more appealing in the winter because you can actually heat it. But the Portland it is open, like I said, explained earlier.
And is that okay with piping?
From what I've researched, obviously Portland's a more temperate city than
Yes.
Brattleboro.
Yeah.
So that's something that we could research further.
And is the Portland Loo, I see that it specifically on the Urban Blue, it specifically said ADA accessible or
Portland
compliant.
is also.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
perfect. Okay,
Yeah,
maybe
it
I
is.
just missed it. Yeah, I saw those events and I went, A, ooh, and B,
Yeah.
the pipes freeze.
Especially for
yeah.
well, what's interesting is I've been a planner from Burlington. They notified me recently that they're installing one right now.
Oh, okay,
And
cool.
invited me to go up when it's done.
Great.
Just check it out and do some ground truthing.
Cool.
So I'm excited for that.
That's a long way to go.
It is. Yeah.
When you gotta go, you gotta go.
If it's not halfway, then yeah.
Just waiting for that line.
I have a question when you said about timing, like they throw you out, like
Is that the second
they
one I saw?
eject you?
It's basically the doors unlock.
Yeah.
It's
And it washes itself. Right?
That is
not the
interesting. The
Portland
doors
Loo,
unlock.
the urban.
No, the other one.
Yeah, the other one does wash itself after
Yeah.
every use.
But you can't get stuck in there while it's washing.
No,
Right.
no. I mean, unless
Question. Well, I think maybe that was the incentive to get out, is that it's about to clean itself.
Day, actually.
God, it's
I
like,
watched too many sci-fi movies.
it's like when the thing turns on in the produce, ding dong, and it starts to rain.
Oh, there you go.
It's like it's a similar thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's warnings.
Did we look into like a more modest structure, like we would build a brick structure with a toilet inside it?
So boring.
Like how I might have found in a park in the UK in 1985.
We can and be happy to price what it would take to just construct one.
Might as well.
Yes, we can.
But we could also build the town that we want.
I'm not optimistic that we're going to actually
Save money.
beat these prices.
Okay.
And these units that we know about and some others that are like them come with the advantage of being designed explicitly for these sort of high use and likely abuse settings to be, as Andrew said, have some safety features related to actually how they're used, and then also some ways in which they kind of self-protect the investment that we make.
Where is the nearest urban blue one that we can go and investigate?
Boston.
Boston.
Ah.
All right.
Seems doable.
Or Montreal.
Road trip.
Which is a little
Yeah,
longer,
pick your flavor.
I'm gonna take the passport to go to that.
Road trip.
Franz.
Franz Reichman, Finance Committee. I just want to second what Daniel just proposed because, there's this other structure that can be created using locally sourced materials for about $200,000. They call it a house, and it typically would contain one or more toilet facilities within it. So it just seems like a lot of money to those of us who haven't studied the issue. And for purposes of proposing this level of expenditure, I think looking at the alternatives would be important too. Thank you.
I'd like to be really clear that nobody's proposing this level of expenditure at the moment.
But
We're sharing information about
Sharing
what we're
a cool
exploring.
idea.
When we get there.
Yeah.
I think
And a
what
house. Oh, go ahead.
Don't we wish we had a
We
lot of
wanna check
houses
on
to put everybody in
Yeah.
that?
Construction.
I think what we're talking about here is a tiny little fortress with a bathroom. A self-cleaning fortress.
Or a place for people to use the bathroom in town.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
That's
I mean,
also
it's like-
durable.
The durability is what I'm referring to.
And we will explore what it would look like to create one ourselves.
And
In the meantime, our intent is to put the porta potties back out this coming summer in the absence
yeah.
of any different direction from you.
Yes, and I have to say that's a really important step too, because we've only had it out partially a full season, so to speak. We're still getting a sense of how they're being used,
Are they in the
or
right
misused.
position?
Are they in the right spots?
Yeah.
I mean, it's prudent to have at least one more year before we start to build a case for.
Sometimes I wonder about the High Grove lot. I don't know. You probably have better stats, but I like the Flat Street parking lot. I know it's called Prospect lot. I never remember that or whatever it's called. It's a Prospect?
Preston.
See? It's the Flat Street parking lot.
So if I might speak to that, we actually, I don't have data to share with you. We can track that more carefully this coming summer.
Yeah.
But what I can tell you by anecdotal observation from the folks who maintained the units is the heaviest use was actually at the Common. And we think that that's because of the variety of uses that happened there. So there were times when it was being used by people who didn't have any place else to go in the nighttime hours. And there were times when it was being used by a broad cross-section of the public when there were events happening there.
Yeah.
Or even just folks who were, enjoying some quiet time in the park.
Yeah. Right.
So that got the heaviest use. Preston was very heavily used as well for, I think, obvious reasons based on the concentrated activity in that part of town. And the one that wasn't used as heavily was the one at High Grove. I don't know that it suggests to us it's not needed, but it's definitely not as essential as the other two.
Sorry, Daniel used it. I know that.
I used it a number
Are you
of
going
times.
to say it? Can we look into the cost of them? I know we already, I guess, own those, but I'd love it if they were all ADA compliant, like the one at High Grove lot is, because I know that, a lot of people are they're coming down to Dottie's and Experience Goods, and accessibility might be important. Right now, only the High Grove lot is accessible, if I'm correct.
So Andrew's report included information about what it would cost to buy new ones, and that is something we can look at. If we're going to make a commitment to porta potties rather than addressing this a different way. Our staff advice at this point would be making a further investment in new porta potties isn't necessary while we're still getting the use out of the used ones that we have and trying to figure out what is the sort of best calibration of this.
What about switching the ADA one to one of the higher used locations?
So the reason it was placed where it was placed is down at the Preston lot.
Yep.
We'd have to move it out into the area used by the cars for it to serve its purpose. Otherwise, you got to get up over a curb.
Somebody's going to hit that. Put it in the parking lot.
We wouldn't think that would be the safest way to install it. And at the Common, you don't have the curb to deal with, but you do have overland travel basically if you're in a wheelchair to gain access to it. And that's why we thought that this past summer the logical place to put that one was at High Grove.
Thank you for that point.
Isn't that where the handicap parking spot is?
There are spaces there in that lot as well. There is also handicap parking available at Preston, but again, there's the curb situation that a person would have to navigate.
We can't put it in the parking lot. That just looks like a disaster in my mind.
Yeah.
That's too bad. Well, thank you for entertaining my musings on that.
So, Andrew, your next step is to explore these various things that people have discussed, but also grant potential.
Yeah, so this Thursday, actually, at Wyndham Regional Commission is going to be having someone from USDA presenting on a grant opportunity that we could potentially look into. So I'll be attending that and asking that question if we could use that money towards something like this. Another thing I was going to bring up is that I do have a larger study than just a memo regarding the different type of facilities. I will continue to add, and I will obviously add a feasibility, kind of not really exactly a feasibility study, but looking at if we did it ourselves and built a structure. And then going back to the ADA accessible porta potties, that's more that what I've been looking at is that if we did, let's say, invest in new porta potties, they would most likely all be ADA compliant. And what does the pricing look like for that?
Thank you for putting so much effort into this.
Zadi District 2. So has there been any investigation into the cost of more family accessible bathrooms like that we would find at state parks or at traffic highways pit stops?
So one of the, I guess the Urban Blue model that we've been looking at, one of those are larger than the like the Portland Loo.
Yeah.
And you can get accessories like a changing station.
Oh, good.
And things like that, and allowable for multiple people. Like if a parent obviously had to have a child in there, they can go in there together. But there's other options, more like what you would see like a park facility, like multiple stalls.
I think that would be more beautiful than porta potties.
Yeah,
Oh,
and,
God,
and it's still pretty open, and there's a lot more research to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have a question for you, Peter. This initiative was first brought to our attention from the Parks and Recreation, and are they satisfied with the improvement?
Absolutely. Yeah, so we had field employees who were encountering significant volumes of human waste in a way that we hadn't seen before, called that out to us, and that's when we got thinking fast about what we could do about it on the fly last summer. The porta potties were the obvious solution in a hurry. And upon reflection, yes, first of all, the direct answer is the field employees did see a very significant improvement.
That's great.
Like, reduced to near zero. Not all the way, not eliminated, but reduced to near zero. And for the reasons we've been talking about now, around this topic more broadly, we actually think that while it was also the readily accessible solution, it is a really solid, effective, temporary solution for us as a community while we grapple with the idea of what more permanent solutions might look like. That's why we think that putting them out for another summer isn't just sort of the best we can do. We actually think it serves an important need for a broad cross-section of people in our community.
So they'll go back out as soon as the thaw, like May-ish or?
Yeah, as soon as, at the places where they're going to sit on ground as opposed to the one location where it sits on concrete, as soon as the ground is firm enough to take them, we'll put them back out.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Andrew.
We'll see you again in a second.
See you in a minute.
Okay. So we are now going to move on to our next and final item under let's see what time it is. Actually, let's take a break. Sorry. We will resume at, I like my clock better. We will resume at 8:10. Thank you. Hello and welcome back to our meeting after our brief break. One thing that has come up during the break, under new business, we are going to switch the financial reports, which were the first item, and instead have the Small Business Assistant Program loans come in its place. And that'll be coming up shortly. Right now, we're still on our last item of unfinished business, and that is a Wyndham Regional Commission update.
So the board asked for information regarding the Wyndham Regional Commission's operations, services to the region, and particularly relationship with the town. There are several documents in the materials this evening that provide just kind of an overview of what the Wyndham Regional Commission does. There's the one-page summary that goes into the town report, and then there's a few different pages that are drawn from the Regional Commission's website, just to provide a flavor for folks about the variety of services that are provided. I think the most pertinent and important part of what we were asked to look into and what we learned when we did is that the Wyndham Regional, the money that the town pays to the Wyndham Regional Commission annually is more like, to use two other examples of annual costs for regional services, it is more like the solid waste district and less like SEVEDS, where SEVEDS makes an annual request, but the town could say, gee, no, thank you, sorry, or whatever, could either not fund it or fund it as we have traditionally at a level different from what was requested. The solid waste district, on the other hand, imposes an assessment. It's an organized entity of the state, the way municipalities are. There's a governing structure. There's a board on which the town has representation, and the assessment that is determined to be necessary to fund the operations that is imposed by that board is an obligation of the town to pay for as long as we remain a member of the solid waste district. And the Wyndham Regional Commission obviously performs very different services, but structurally is effectively the same. It was created by the state. The bylaws of the Wyndham Regional Commission establish that the board, the commission itself, will determine in its annual budget how much the per capita rate is, and then that per capita rate is imposed upon all of the member municipalities. And so it's a non-optional expense unless we were to withdraw from participation in the commission. Staff does not recommend withdrawing from the commission.
Thank you, Peter. Questions, comments, discussion on the board?
No.
No.
Well, if it's mandatory, I'm not.
Mandatory is
Well,
mandatory.
we don't have to be members.
Right.
It's not like that's where we take our garbage. It's a different thing altogether. And the services that they provide are primarily for municipalities that don't have large staff and planning departments. So it's different in that sense from the Waste Management District.
It is different in that sense.
I would agree with David, but I know that the planning department does utilize
Works well with,
services.
yeah, especially around the brownfields grants. Well, maybe not especially, but that's one particular area.
I think it's more like mapping, GIS services.
Is that true, Andrew?
Well, I'm actually doing some GIS now. We have upgraded our own GIS software, so, yeah.
But
That's a new wrinkle.
The current GIS we use for all of our tax maps, for instance, was created by Jeff at the Wyndham
Yeah.
Regional Commission, I believe.
Yes.
So
It's not downstairs in the assessor's office?
So
No.
it's utilized there.
But it's created from Jeff Nugent.
Right, and if you want to take a deeper dive into all that, I think we should bring you information from Sue and Jen and others who are actually managing that system.
If we have to look at significant budget cuts, that would be the time to do it, but not now.
I don't think there's the will for that.
No. Okay.
We're happy with that report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that update. And with that, we close out old business. Gone. Move into new business, and remember we have made a switch, and so our first item, item A, is now Small Business Assistant Program loans. And we will be first speaking with Jason Lively of Duo. Jason, please take your former spot at the table.
While Jason comes up, I'll summarize the Small Business Assistance Program Loan Committee, on which both Dave Scholes and Patrick Moreland serve as members, so they can speak to the details of this if you'd like. But the summary is that the committee has unanimously recommended that we make a $27,000 loan to Mr. Lively and Duo Vermont to be amortized over 5 years at 3% per annum. With interest-only repayments for the first 6 months in the monthly amount of $67.50, and then monthly payments for the remainder of the term of the loan in the amount of $485.15. Security and collateral will be in the second position, UCC on all the business assets, and a personal guarantee for Mr. Lively. And so we recommend that it be approved. There are two conditions that we ask that you attach to the approval. One is the current owners of Duo Restaurant paying off a loan to Brattleboro Savings and Loan that is remaining in place and I guess being addressed as part of the transition of ownership there. And similarly, that the current owners pay off a small business assistance program loan to the town of Brattleboro that has a remaining balance at this time of $9,268.08, and that we obtain discharges of all liens.
Okay. And that none of that is a surprise to you, Jason?
That is all
agreeable and
correct, yes.
Comments or questions from this board for Jason or for Peter?
You want to say anything about the transition? Maybe your history?
Yeah, so I worked for Keith and Stephanie for a few years here, but previously in Denver, Colorado. And then also my history in town here. I managed the bar down at Whetstone for the first 2.5 years that it was open, and then here. So my experience running the restaurant is pretty deep. But I just, there isn't a restaurant that I've ever been to or worked at that has such a paternal feeling. So when I had the opportunity to take it over, I jumped at it. That said, I am a an individual who doesn't have a whole lot of capital behind me, and so the starting operational cost is really what this funding is for. The ability to pay the staff, it's within the first month of new ownership. The ability to purchase the beer, wine, liquor, and food. And so all things that are kind of urgent and necessary prior to income under my name. But as far as the restaurant goes, other than me telling the public this, it will be seamless, and there won't really be a jump of sorts as far as anyone walking through the door would be concerned. So,
I was thrilled when I heard, because it's been on the radar of a lot of people that it was for sale for a while, and of course you always kind of get scared because it's such an anchor to the downtown right on the corner. So it's great that somebody so familiar with it already is taking it over. Is it just you?
It's just yeah. I will go in as the new owner as well as the bar manager, and I'll be behind the bar again for portions of the week, which kind of helps the financial viability of the restaurant going forward.
Wish you all the best.
Thank you. And I believe the bar is open for another hour or so. If anybody wants a beverage.
Well, we turned down the CBD.
I know.
Well, this would be on your own time.
Okay, that's a good distinction there.
That's fine coming from you, Franz.
So on this item, we haven't had a lot of motions this evening, but this is a motion item.
Can I? Yes, please.
Yes, please do.
Great, I'd love to. I'd love to make a motion to approve a small business assistance program loan to Jason Lively / Duo Vermont LLC in the amount of $27,000, amortized over 5 years at 3% per annum, with interest only for 6 months, and monthly payments thereafter of principal and interest in the amount of $485.15, contingent on the current owners paying off a loan to the Brattleboro Savings and Loan Association and their SBAP loan to the town of Brattleboro, and obtaining discharges of all liens.
Excellent. Tim has made that very thorough motion.
Done my job.
Well done. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Can I just say that I really appreciate this. This assistance loan is really the only way that I would be able to do something that I thought that I wouldn't be able to do before. And so I really appreciate it, and thank you so much.
You're most welcome, and I'm really happy that we have abilities to do things like this.
Yeah, that's why we have it, to support
Very happy.
this exact type of thing, so thank you.
All right, we'll see you soon. Okay, so our next item, under still the Small Business Assistance Program loan, because there was 2 items under that, is Northeast Processing.
This one is a bit more complicated, but we equally, staff and the committee are recommending unanimously the approval of it. It is not the actual making of a loan, but rather the approval for the town's position in the line of creditors that would be eligible to actually receive compensation in the event of a failure. Sorry.
It's okay. You can still say it.
And the unexpected and unpleasant event of a failure. Then we always sit in a low position. This program is kind of loans of last resort. Folks who can go get robust financing elsewhere, go get it elsewhere typically. But when they're part of the package has a gap in it, and we can fill that gap, that's the role we play, and that's why people are able to make an acknowledgement like Jason just did of the importance of this small business loan program in our community. So we have previously made such a loan in this instance to help an important new venture make progress here in our community. As part of the continued operation in ways that they'll explain for themselves in a moment, they're going to take for a short period of time an additional borrowing from Brattleboro Savings and Loan. And we need to acknowledge that because we're behind Brattleboro Savings and Loan in the line of creditors. So we need to take an even further. Basically, the BSNL will have a spot and another spot for the portions of the debt that they've offered or made, and will fall into a further behind position, if you will. But for all practical purposes, this is a short-term bridge, and the committee has fully vetted it, and the recommendation is that we think that this is a risk worth taking in a situation where we have already taken a risk because it's the right thing to do based on all the facts related to this venture. So if you have a deeper dive you want to take from the review of it, I could address questions to David or to Patrick. I think you'd probably like to hear from the owners about what's happening.
I have a more basic question, which is what is Northeast Processing?
Let's start there.
We're a hemp extractor, so we extract CBD oil from hemp. And we purchase hemp from local farmers, and the purpose of this line of credit that we've requested is to actually purchase biomass, to make sure that we had the money to be able to purchase the biomass so we could extract the hemp and sell the oils.
So we support local farmers, we're in this and started this business in Brattleboro to support this as a growing economic driver in the state of Vermont. And so we look to support Vermont farmers, and in doing so, and we're in a growth period, which is the positive about why we're doing this. We reached out to Brattleboro Savings and Loan to get this temporary line of credit to get us to have greater purchasing power in the short term as we're expanding our operation. The original use of the funds from the town and what we're continuing to apply that towards is the physical expansion and the build out of our facility, whereas the money coming from the bank is a temporary use of funds for the biomass since it's a seasonal entity.
Great. Thank you.
And can we ask for them to identify themselves, please?
Oh, could you please identify yourselves?
My name is Victor Morrison. I'm the CFO.
And my name is Carl Christensen. I'm the CEO.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from members of the board?
I guess I have a question about where this size loan fits in with the other loans that we provided. The previous one was 27,000. This is 250.
No, this is 70,000.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
This is identifying what the
If you'd like to give us 250, we'd be happy to take it.
All right.
I don't see
70
anywhere on these papers that it's 70.
It isn't, because you're not approving a loan. So the loan has been previously approved and made.
Yeah.
And what you're approving tonight, if you do, is the subordination of our position among the creditors.
Okay.
For a 6-month period.
For a 6-month period, and then we'll be restored to where we are today.
Very good.
Okay.
Since it's been vetted, it seems like I'd improve this.
I agree. Once again, this is a motion item. Would anybody like to make that motion?
I would move that we authorize the town manager to sign any and all documents necessary to subordinate the town's Small Business Assistance Program loan to Northeast Processing LLC to a revised mortgage and line of credit from the Brattleboro Savings and Loan Association.
Okay, thank you, David. David has made that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Well, and not just because you said yes, but I would like to echo what was said earlier, again, that this is such a great program, and I see this as being such a welcoming town for doing business in, and we're really pleased to work with you. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm proud of the program.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
We should really be collecting these quotes now.
Yes. Well, Jan is collecting them
For a
in
new
minutes.
pamphlet.
The old Brattleboro hates business.
All right. Don't open the
Kind of
can of
fading out.
worms. So at this time, I'm assuming it's best to bounce back to financial reports, and then we will close out with item C after that.
Yes, please.
All right, thank you.
And this one, if the board will allow me, John O'Connor had planned to be here tonight to present this item. He's unfortunately homesick and not able to do that. I'd like to offer a brief layperson's overview to this in like 3 sentences, and then just read his 4 or 5 paragraph memo, if that's okay, because I think that'll be the best way to disclose the pertinent information to the public. So what we have before us are the completed audit documents for the fiscal year that ended last June 30. The auditors have issued clean reports with no findings, no corrective actions, both in the general overall audit, referred to as the independent auditor's report, that is the sort of audit of our basic municipal operations, and in the single audit. The single audit document is the smaller of the two, and it speaks specifically to the town's management of loans, and it's an additional, more intense audit on loan administration that is required, grant administration, that is required when an entity receives more than a certain amount of money from the federal, that originates as federal funding through grant programs. So we're fortunate that we're very active with grant seeking and grant awards, and so we do exceed that threshold, and most years do have to do a single audit, as we did have to do for this particular fiscal year. Because there's some terminology that's important at this moment in time when we are disclosing to the public the clean audits that we've received, I think it's helpful if I just read through John's memorandum to the board, which is dated November 7th. We had originally expected to have the audit on one of the November meetings, and then there was actually just an issue with the production of the documents that the auditor had to handle, and so it's taken us a while to get it in front of you. But the auditor's work was completed back in the fall, and again, was a completely clean audit. As follows, the auditors issued an unmodified opinion on Brattleboro's 2019 financial statements, stating, quote, "In our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly, in all material respects, the respective financial position of the governmental activities, the business type activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of the town of Brattleboro, Vermont, as of June 30, 2019, and the respective changes in financial position, and where applicable, cash flows thereof, and the budgetary comparison for the general fund for the year then ended in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America," end quote. There were no audit adjustments proposed by the auditors resulting from their audit. The general fund closed the year with a use of fund balance of $376,583. That was $393,417 better than budgeted. In other words, we had planned to use closer to $750,000 to $800,000 worth of fund balance and only used the $376,583. This was due primarily to favorable budget variances in the town manager's office, employee benefits, and the police department. The general fund closed the year with a fund balance of $3,131,610, of which $2,047,513 was unassigned. $337,119 was committed, and $746,978 was non-spendable. The unassigned fund balance was $240,938 above the targeted 10% of 2020 budgeted expenditures.
Yes.
And as was referred to, yes, so we're above the 10%. And as we discussed thoroughly earlier, that 240 is in the budget that you're considering, you're in the final stages of your consideration on now, as a recommended use of fund balance for capital purposes going forward into FY21. There is a substantial amount of additional financial information on the town's activities contained in the 60 pages of financial statements and the independent auditor's report. And then regarding the single audit, the report on schedule of expenditures of federal awards, internal controls, and compliance with laws and regulations, parentheses, single audit, end parentheses, is a document that reflects all federal awards, grants received and expended by the town, either directly or as a pass-through from a state agency. There are no audit findings in the FY 2019 report regarding expenditures. The audit includes a review on internal control over financial reporting, and the FY 2019 report did not identify any deficiencies in internal control considered to be material weaknesses. The notes to schedule of expenditures of federal awards did not identify any material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, or audit findings related to the financial statements or the internal control over major programs of federal awards.
Thank you, Peter.
Welcome.
I have 3 questions that I'd
Sure.
like to ask.
Okay.
How long is it Bachelor and Associates?
Yes.
How long have they been our auditors?
To give you a very exact answer, I need to double check, but it has been, I've been with the town for 5 years, and they've either done 3 or 4 audits because we hired them after I arrived. And we did that through a competitive process. We issued an RFP and they successfully bid.
When do you think the last time they had a finding was?
We had a small technical finding either last year or the year before. It related to an advance that had been made regarding one of the federal grants that was not fully expended and needed to be refunded to the granting agency.
Great. Do you know the last time we had a material finding? Has it been since
It was before I arrived.
And how often do we go out for RFP for our auditors?
Every 3 years we have been. That's been our practice, and I believe we are one more audit beyond this one with Bachelor, if I remember correctly.
Great.
Banker Brandy.
I can check on those
Banker Brandy.
details and email the board if you'd like.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Any other?
Thank you for asking those questions.
You're very welcome.
Are these batch holders related to the Brattleboro batch holders?
They are not, as far as I know.
Good on you knowing the answer to that. Other questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the Franz? Like that.
Thank you for such a
We're
good
used to
report.
getting clean bills.
Good department.
Yeah, I always get a little.
As we expect.
I get a little. If they're clean too many years in a row, I get weird. I get weirded out.
They were clean before these guys.
Still get weirded out.
Go ahead.
Okay.
That's just in my nature.
Andrew.
All right, our last item under new business is neighborhood designation area regarding a new state program, and we have coming back to our table, Andrew.
Slideshow. Presentation for more for the audience. Very short one.
Just really quickly, to put in context for those who pay attention to things that the state allows us to do, ways in which the state helps hub communities, which we often are highlighting, and we're a hub community with special burdens. There are some ways in which the state does try to partner with us over specifically those issues. And so 2 of the programs that have existed for a long time that we participate in are the designated downtown, we have one, and the village center, which we also have one out in West Brattleboro. This is a development or a program that's being developed and being offered by the state that builds upon those existing programs to offer opportunities to help municipalities meet housing needs.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. My name's Andrew Graminsky. I'm the planning technician for the town's department, planning services department. Sue Filling was going to be here too, but she is sick, so she could not make it, unfortunately. But she also has been very instrumental with this effort. So Peter gave a pretty good background of what this is and how it kind of came to be. So basically, it's one of those 5 designations that the state offers, and basically to align policies and provide incentives that encourage new development in compact walkable areas. The town currently has the 2 designations, being downtown and then the West Brattleboro Village, which has the village center designation. And for an NDA designation, you need to be within a half mile of a designated downtown or a quarter mile of a village center in terms of being able to walk there within that distance. And we chose as a town, and here's a map, to be within that half mile buffer, which is that radius you see on the map, as well as an extended area up Canal Street to the interchange of exit 1. We felt like this extension was needed in terms of what kind of development is seen in that area, especially with those shopping centers and the kind of residential development that already exists. As well as that there's some, as you can see, part of that radius is in New Hampshire, the Connecticut River, quite a bit of floodplain, as well as already really highly developed areas. So that's kind of how we got to this map right here. So if we got this designation, it would really encourage the creation of new homes in development-ready locations near shops and services. And kind of the meat of another reason why we want to get this designation is the benefits that come with it. Qualified mixed income projects are exempt from Act 250 regulations, which, if you don't know much about the costs behind Act 250, it's quite a bit of money. Depending on the project, it could be thousands of dollars. This could save developers a lot of money in terms of those soft costs.
It's not just money, it's time.
Oh, God.
Time and money. The process, yeah.
And aggravation.
Exactly. Thank you, Liz. Another great thing is for properties, let's say that don't meet that mixed income qualification, they can still get a 50% discount, which is still a lot of money. A&R fees for wastewater review are capped at $50 for projects that have reviewed sewer allocation. Again, a lot of money and time saved. Municipalities will receive priority consideration for more grant opportunities to create housing and affordable housing in the town. Exemptions from land gains tax, and for those of you who might not know what a land gains tax is, I have a definition, which it's kind of complicated, but basically a land gains tax is imposed on the gain from the sale or exchange of land that was held less than 6 years. That's literally what it is. And then another one that's kind of big is a local conditional use decision that a housing project meets the character of an area cannot be appealed, which is also can be helpful in certain situations. So I'll bring it back to the map if you have any further questions, but we have submitted a draft 1 to the state, and I actually heard back from an individual today with some first wave of input, and I will input that into our hopefully final draft that we want to submit February 3rd, and then by the end of the month of February, we will go in front of the Vermont Downtown Board to give a presentation, and at that time they will make the decision for us. And there is a renewal process if we get it, and that happens at the same time as the downtown designation renewal, which is every 5 years. Any questions?
So I'm excited about this.
We are too.
Mainly because I'm really a proponent of densifying our downtown, not just our red zone, but our yellow zone. I'm slightly disturbed that that a house I own is in a blue section that makes me think it's underwater already as we speak. Well, Frost Street is in a flood zone.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, thank you, Dave.
Happens every spring.
But should I be excited about that aspect as far as a couple tools? Looks like it might encourage some more downtown, I'm going to say downtown even though it's a loose term.
The urban area.
Urban area development.
Yeah, and in terms of where you want to see development, I know Vermont doesn't have much in terms of growth management, but from my experience in Washington State, making sure that we're controlling where growth grows is really important, not just for the urban areas, but for the rural areas. Sure. So we can save prime ag land and forest land. And I think this also just encourages developers to see that we could have these incentives, like, wow, we want to build in Brattleboro because we can. And think about all the really cool opportunities that maybe in the future we could see. And not just, the one type of housing, different types of variety, which is really helpful.
I think switching the idea or the reality that living downtown is only for people who can afford to pay at a premium would do wonders for our economy before we even get to talk about the environmental effects of having denser downtowns.
And making areas more walkable, then you don't have to maybe have the number of car trips, in terms of, it really relates to parking as well. It's all very interconnected.
So these measures are infill development, anti-sprawl, walkable, probably even transit friendly. And certainly consistent with the master plan goals of keeping growth within the east side of Route 91. And I also think that these incentives are pretty good for the state of Vermont. There's not that much that they can give us, but they seem to know what a pain in the butt Act 250 is. So that's great. And I applaud you and Sue, and I think it's a great program.
I do too.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I think it's going to be a big deal program. That's what I think. If you can really make sure that people understand and can become excited about what this means, I think it's going to be a really great program.
And one thing we really kind of thought of and really thought about, not just to make sure that it's compatible with the town plan, that when growth does come, we're being proactive with the type of programs we have to address that. And that really, that's what this is doing.
Good, thank you. David?
Thank you. I think given the shortage, the national shortage of affordable housing, anything that's going to reduce construction costs and development costs is welcome, very welcome. So thanks for digging this up.
Yep.
Further questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the front? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so
thank
much.
you.
Thanks for hanging with us.
And your presentation.
Oh, it was very nice,
We don't get that
by the way. And it was
My
nice.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Doesn't usually work.
That is true, David. That's always a sad
I
problem.
have something that needs to be signed.
Okay. Where are we here?
Done.
We're done.
Have to have an action on that.
No, I think that was just an excitement piece. Okay. With no further business to discuss on this agenda, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I have something that needs to be signed.
Excellent. David has made that motion. Do we have to sign it before we adjourn?
No.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Meeting adjourns at 8:41 p.m. Thank you.
BCTV.
Thank you.
Welcome to 2020.
I just forgot how to make my own signature. I have
Even in the
two
future.
signatures, like the fancy one and the fast one.
Did we get fancy on?
You got half and half.